Hey guys, it's Gadi, Schwartz, and tonight the advice when it comes to investments, maybe don't look.
Hey, look, what I have to do is build a strong country. You can't really watch the stock market.
Well, plenty of people were watching today, but it was President Trump's comments on a potential recession or lack thereof that sent Wall Street into a tailspin. Now, some experts are saying this is the market begging enough with the tariff talk. Plus, is TikTok finally about to get sold?
Do you think there's going to be a deal on TikTok soon?
There could be. We're dealing with 4 different groups, and a lot of people want it, and it's up to me.
So who are these possible buyers? We are leaning into the likely suspects in a deep dive with our Stephen Romo and the latest in the Menendez brothers saga. In a reversal out of Los Angeles, the new DA is backing off supporting the resentencing of Eric and Lyle Menendez for the murder of their parents, but hinting at a possible path forward for the brothers to be let out of prison. Those are just some of the stories we are following. There is so much more to unpack tonight, so let's get going because this is Stay Tuned Now. All right, so tonight is one of those nights where Wall Street is grateful for that closing bell to let everyone go home, to take a deep breath, to rethink how they feel about things, and to try not to think of words that start with R, like reciprocal tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, or recession, because the Dow dropped about 800 or 900 points. It was also the worst day for the NASDAQ in 3 years. This is the trade war escalates with more tariffs seemingly announced every single day. China slapping chicken and wheat with a 15% fee, while pork and beef are being charged 10% more. And Ontario, Canada is jacking up electricity exports to the U.S. by 25%. And when Trump was straight up asked if recession is on the horizon, well, here's how that went down.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time.
So let's bring in 2 of the smartest guys I know, NBC business and data correspondent Brian Chung and NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. News brothers, is the sky falling here or what? Brian, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, let's acknowledge that it has been a brutal day on Wall Street. It was a brutal week if you kind of zoom out over the last few days when it comes to trading on Wall Street. In fact, if you zoom out even farther than that, since inauguration, the S&P 500, which is generally seen as the most broad-based measure of the entire stock market, it's fallen by over 7%. So it has not been good. But what is interesting is that the slide in the overall markets has coincided with the ramping up of rhetoric from the White House over its tariff war. So that's definitely one piece of the recipe when it comes to investor jitteriness over exactly what's going on. They want more certainty from the Trump administration over what would be the impact of these tariffs. And then secondly, you had some commentary over the weekend, or lack of commentary, when President Trump was asked on Air Force One whether or not the tariff policy could have the effect of tilting the economy into a recession. He didn't answer the question, which I think underscores some concern on Wall Street that investors are saying, you know what, maybe there is a possibility that this could tilt the United States into an economic downturn. All of that, the reason for why we saw the stock market on many measures falling so steeply today.
Okay, so Vaughn, we saw what Trump said yesterday, what he didn't say yesterday, some of the effects of his words. What do you think he, or at least possibly his Commerce Secretary, are going to say tomorrow? Because they seem to have some crossed wires on all this, right?
Right. Howard Lutnick, his Commerce Secretary, I think you could contend, outside of his Vice President, J.D. Vance, is about the biggest cheerleader on the airwaves for anything that President Trump does. And this weekend on Meet the Press with our friend Kristen Welker, he was defiant that there is no recession that is on the way, though, as Brian noted, 2 different times, President Trump was asked this weekend whether a recession could be on the way, and he sidestepped and didn't dispute it. And that is why you have seen over the course of the last week, Trump and others acknowledge that there will be, quote, disruptions to the American economy. And nobody is saying that the stock market falling or some of these other key economic indicators that have suggested that potential cooling in the economy are the result of anything other than the economy that they inherited from the Biden administration, but also acknowledging that their own economic policies are contributing to this, namely the tariffs that they continue to implement, not only on our key trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China, but also their plans to issue further reciprocal tariffs in the weeks ahead against other countries. And so that is where you, I think, have a very serious question as to what extent does President Trump and his cabinet try to tell the American public at large and companies and importers that things are all right, or do they continue to send the signal that a down economy may be the consequences of short-term financial pains for what they can then to be long-term gains of weaning the United States off of its reliance of global products and imports?
So when it comes to that short-term financial pain, Brian, I mean, where are we going to start to see the worst of the day-to-day kind of pain if things start to go south?
I just want to point out that we are in correction territory on the NASDAQ, which is the tech-heavy sector, includes a heavy weight for companies like Google and Amazon and, Tesla, for example. But correction is just 10%. In fact, we're not in a bear market yet. Bear market is defined as 20%. And even when you zoom out and you look at incidents like the COVID pandemic, as well as the 2008 financial crisis, the stock market losses in those cases were just substantially larger than what we're seeing right now. So, yes, it was an ugly day on Wall Street, but when you see 2, 3, 4% of a decline in a given index in one single day, it's not necessarily everyone freaking out or a Wall Street panic. So let's just kind of outline that. But to your question over where we could see the pain, again, you see ahead of you, the NASDAQ saw the steepest losses today. And as I point out, the NASDAQ is the first one of these major stock markets to hit a correction, which is defined as a 10% decline from its most recent high. One specific stock I want to point out here is one that I've already mentioned. Tesla shares are down 45% year to date. That means that if you invested $1 of Tesla on January 1st, you now only have 55 cents. So as we talk about these recessionary fears, yes, you're seeing some of those stats ahead of you. Goldman Sachs, Yardeni Research saying the odds of a recession are going up. What we've seen in terms of market pricing does suggest that it's these tech stocks that are taking it on the chin right now. That's where we're seeing most of the pain on Wall Street.
And Vaughn, talking a little bit about like some real world retaliation, Canadian retaliation. Let's listen to Canada's new Prime Minister designate Mark Carney, and then the Ontario Premier Doug Ford, because he had some pretty interesting things to say.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada.
If the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
So what are the chances that Trump is going to start showing Canada some respect here, Vaughn?
It's a good question. I don't think that we have seen any indicators that he will. He continually mocks Canada and suggests that they should become the 51st state. And we have seen no actions outside of ones that are intended to weaken the Canadian economy taken by this president. And there is the potential that such a rift could really create a friction that could only escalate this even further. You heard about the potential effort to not only put 25% additional payments on energy that is consumed in America, Canadian energy, but also potentially trying to cut off electricity sent to the United States to places like Michigan and Minnesota and New York. And the new Prime Minister, Carney, the replacement for Justin Trudeau, has been very, very vocal in these first 24 hours and has, over the course of the last months, been defiant in saying that if another country goes and tries to punch Canada, that they will stand up and, much like their own hockey team, that they will ultimately win. And so I think President Trump is not looking at a prime minister who is going to be any easier to deal with or more inclined to back down as Justin Trudeau, who I think I'll say, Gadi, you remember during the transition, less than a week after his election victory, Justin Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago to try to build a good, healthy relationship between the two partners. And we saw that relationship really cripple itself over the course of the following months.
And now we see some Canadian hands around the power cord there. NBC's Brian Chung and Vaughn Hilliard, thanks so much for joining us, guys. Meanwhile, is TikTok going to be sold to U.S. investors? Well, after years of back and forth about shutting it down, forcing a sale, pushing back deadlines, it looks like there is finally a short list of who could buy it. So could it be mega YouTuber Mr. Beast, the former owner of the LA Dodgers, the founder of Reddit, or just some random person we don't even know about? Stephen Romo has more.
The clock is ticking on TikTok, with President Trump's 75-day pause on banning the app set to end within a month. The president seems optimistic, saying he's working with multiple bidders.
Do you think there's going to be a deal on TikTok soon?
There could be. We're dealing with 4 different groups, and a lot of people want it, and it's up to me.
It's not clear exactly who those 4 groups are, but bidders are clamoring for attention. Employer.com CEO Jesse Tinsley, a former firefighter, is leading one high-profile group to buy the social media app. In a recent op-ed for Fox News, Tinsley highlighted how important TikTok is for Main Street, calling it a lifeline for small businesses, adding how it can build a customer base for real people with real dreams building real businesses.
I think American control, whether that's us or another party, I think that's paramount.
Big names like YouTube personality Mr. Beast joining that group bid.
We have an offer ready for you.
They recently said the offer is, quote, north of $30 billion in cash. Another bidder with a vision, real estate billionaire Frank McCourt, leading what he calls the people's bid.
My view is that when ByteDance understands that they can transact without selling the algorithm, I think their view is going to be totally different.
If he's successful, he says TikTok would not use any Chinese technology, instead being run on his nonprofit's platform, allowing users to have more control over their data. Reddit founder Alexis Ohanian has joined that bid. Another offer led by Wyoming wealth management billionaire Reed Rasner, presenting a plan to have U.S. users buy into the platform as founding members.
This is about the American people, and this is about bringing TikTok to America. And I'm going to fight for that day in and day out.
Rasner says his offer is around $47.5 billion and that the Trump administration has reviewed it. But the big question, will TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance be swayed to sell?
Will China agree to sell it?
I think that's obviously something that's out of our hands. We've obviously put together a very, very strong offer.
Tariff tensions also escalating between the Trump administration and the Chinese government. Frank McCourt telling Reuters just last week ByteDance hasn't retained a banker or even set a valuation. President Trump says he'd be open to the U.S. only owning 50% of TikTok and extending the ban deadline again if needed.
Hopefully China will approve of the deal, but they're going to play a role.
Perhaps acknowledging all the cards China holds as this TikTok tug-of-war drags on.
And Stephen Romo joins us now. Stephen, what are the odds that this deal is actually going to pan out by April 5th? And if it doesn't, are we looking at another extension here?
Yeah, just a few weeks to get this multi-billion-dollar deal done. It seems like a big task to complete. Trump has put J.D. Vance on the task, though. The vice president's supposed to be leading the effort to find a U.S. company to buy this. But Trump says that he's not shy about another extension as well. So how he's actually going to do that, that's yet to be seen. Another executive order or the law itself has a built-in 90-day window, but they have to show to Congress that they have a deal on the table and that ByteDance is ready to play ball, which is not at all clear that that will actually happen. He could also ask the Justice Department just to not enforce the law. So it's yet to be seen exactly how he'll extend this again if he needs to, but he has said he will find a way to do it.
It is going to be tough to do this in the middle of a tariff war. We're in this tariff war right now with China. Is that going to possibly hurt the U.S. deal? Could it help? Could it be somewhat of an incentive?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. There's opinions on both sides of that. The tariff issue, the tensions around the tariff issue, Trump has said that tariffs could be sort of a way to make China get on board with the deal. China has originally said that they are not for ByteDance selling TikTok to a U.S. company. They did soften that position a bit back in January, saying it should be up to the private businesses to actually make that decision. So with that said, we'll see what ByteDance itself has to say of whether or not they're going to have this deal in place.
We sure will. Stephen Romo, thank you. And here in L.A., another back-and-forth question that is still unanswered. Will the Menendez brothers be resentenced or not? Well, today, we've got somewhat of a decision in the murder case. It turned true crime documentary, turned political hot-button issue. L.A.'s brand-new district attorney has decided to leave it up to a judge to decide whether the brothers will get out of jail or get out of prison unless they basically give a rundown of apologies. Take a look at this.
District Attorney's Office, if it is presented with these new insights, unequivocal, sincere acknowledgments of all the lies they have told for the past over 30 years, we too, in the District Attorney's Office, will reconsider whether or not we would want to go forward with a resentencing motion.
And the family of Eric and Lyle Menendez say the DA's demands are effectively holding the brothers hostage and that, quote, they have apologized for the horrific actions they took. They have apologized to us and they have demonstrated their atonement, end quote. And that is the history. It is the history of the admitted lies and partial admissions that the district attorney says is key to all of this. The first being the original 911 call and the courtroom testimony that followed that. Take a look from deep within the archives here at NBC.
Yes, please. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? Someone killed my parents. Pardon me?
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
Well, Liz Kreutz joins us now with more. Liz, I mean, there are plea deals and then there's this, right? So let's start with the list of apologies that the DA is looking for. What does he say that the brothers have not atoned for?
Yeah, he essentially, Gadi, says that there are a number of lies that the brothers told when he went back and looked at the original transcripts from the original cases and all the original testimony, that he felt there were a number of lies that the brothers have not acknowledged. They have acknowledged, of course, that they committed these murders, but he says that they did a number of things to try to cover up the murders, including saying the mafia were the ones that killed their parents. He said even once they were convicted, he went down a list of things and said that Lyle tried to get his girlfriend to come to prison, and he said to her, please, go and testify that my father drugged and raped you, something he says the girlfriend refused to do. He also said that originally their testimony was not that they acted in self-defense because of fears of sexual abuse. He said that they acted in self-defense that night because they feared that it was their parents that were going to kill them. So he really just wants to feel like they are going to publicly come out and acknowledge all of these different lies. But ultimately, the big picture thing is that the DA says that he is withdrawing the previous DA's recommendation for resentencing. He is not recommending that they be resentenced, which makes it pretty challenging for them to continue down this path, even though they still have the option.
And Liz, like from a logistics standpoint, how are they supposed to do this? Do they write a very long letter, the two of them? Is it testimony in front of a judge? Do we know any of those details?
Yeah, I mean, the DA was asked that because it's like, okay, what do you mean? You've gone through and basically said you don't believe these guys. So then what can they do to make you believe that they're actually apologizing and you trust them? And he basically said they have smart attorneys. They'll figure it out. But yeah, it could be a video message. It could be a written declaration. It could be at an upcoming public hearing. Now, his cousin, the Menendez brothers' cousin, who they're very close with, and she's a big advocate for them, she has now spoken out. And she basically said that the DA is trying to force them to acknowledge the DA's truth, not their own truth.
Interesting. And there's always a clemency route that's talked about here in California a lot. What's the status on Governor Newsom's decision? Because that's been pending for a while, right?
Yeah, so there's three paths the Menendez brothers are trying to take to get out of prison. There's the habeas path, which was a new trial that is going to be pretty far-fetched for them to get, likely not happening. There's this resentencing path that we're dealing with today, also a little less likely given the DA's announcement today, but we'll see. And then there's clemency, and that could be from Governor Newsom at any time come out and say, okay, you're free. What Governor Newsom recently did, though, is he weighed in on this, and he said he wanted the parole board to run a risk assessment of the brothers to figure out what risks they'd be to the public if they were released. We expect that to take about 90 days. So our estimate is that we should have the findings from that in the beginning of summer. Governor Newsom's not likely to make a decision until he gets that risk assessment. So we'll see, Gadi.
Liz Kreutz, thank you. And let's turn now to Angela Sinandela for the legal side of things. Angela, thanks so much for joining us. There's the DA's path for resentencing, right? But there's also like the original court path. Could this ultimately come down to a judge's decision that would be independent from what the DA was even suggesting?
Yes, that's absolutely right, Gadi. So even if the DA had continued with this petition, it almost didn't matter in terms of who had the ultimate say. So the court here, meaning the judge, is always the one who, in a circumstance like this, gets to determine the length of even original sentencing, right, after a conviction, or resentencing in a case like this. So the judge then would consider the district attorney's opinion and also certainly consider the defendant's opinion, but the judge makes their own decision based on the material they have, based on how much they believe this defendant has been rehabilitated and whether or not they believe that this defendant will go back out and commit another crime. That's really what this ultimately comes down to, Gadi.
And if you were advising the Menendez brothers, I mean, is there any downside in, I don't know, like just immediately writing this out or making some sort of video and apologizing for everything under the sun at this point? Or do they want to proceed carefully here?
Yeah, Gadi, that's exactly right. They do certainly want to proceed carefully. Why? Because this really mirrors negotiations that happen behind closed doors in really like plea deals, right? So the DA or the prosecutor will offer options, but they will never really guarantee their action based on what they want you to do. So if you listen closely to Hochman's language, he never said, if you do this, we will definitely then support your petition. He just said, we will then consider whether or not we will, right? So obviously with that, I mean, look, they're already in prison. It's not like they could be convicted again, but it's not 100% clear that if they followed that DA's advice, that it would really support their petition, because ultimately, as we said, the judge decides, right? So it's possible the judge could actually look at that and say, wait a minute, have a different opinion on how all of those lies and the admission of those lies would affect his opinion of their threat.
Yeah, I know it's not, but this does look like the most like wacky upside down plea deal that I've ever seen, decades and decades in the making. And yet when it comes to the judge having the final say, does the governor here have like the final say, like clemency? Could the governor just set the brothers free right now if he wanted to?
Yeah, so the governor has just this total control over clemency, and there's two options there, right? There's either a pardon that he could give or a commutation of sentence, meaning just reducing it, and that is ultimately up to him. I will say, though, that most governors don't make that decision just themselves, totally up to their discretion. They usually ask for advice from a parole board like he is doing here, so it is possible that he will follow whatever the parole board recommends in this case, and if the parole board determines that there's very low risk for re-entry into society, it is likely then that he would get on board, just given how public he has made this entire assessment process. And so it is up to him, ultimately, Gadi.
And lastly, sorry, last question, I promise, and it's tangentially related here. Clemency, when we're talking about governors and like that crazy power, this is a murder case, right? Double murder. Do governors have just, like, let's say you had a governor and there was a heinous murder. Could that governor just come in and say, nah, you know what? That's my friend. He's out. Clemency granted. Complete pardon?
Gadi, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. Like, the governor has unbridled power in that way, in the same way that we know the president has power, right, at a federal level. So that is something that state constitutions give to the governor in the same way that our federal constitution, our U.S. one, gives to the president.
Yeah, and yet you usually see murder cases tried in state as opposed to federal. Just wild stuff. Angela Sinandela, such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And tonight, a federal judge is blocking the Trump administration from deporting a Columbia University student and Palestinian activist who was arrested by ICE agents over the weekend. Now, the student's lawyer says he is not here illegally and that he has a green card and a permanent residency. And all of this is happening as hundreds are now protesting the arrest. NBC's Emily Akeda has more.
ICE off our campus now! Tonight, anger spilling onto New York City sidewalks after federal immigration agents arrested Mahmoud Khalil, who his lawyer says is a legal permanent resident with a green card. Khalil recently finished a master's at Columbia and helped lead pro-Palestinian protests on campus. His lawyer adding he was detained on Saturday in front of his wife, a U.S. citizen who is 8 months pregnant. The Department of Homeland Security says Khalil led activities aligned to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. But tonight, a federal judge stepping in, temporarily blocking any effort to remove Khalil from the U.S. Columbia became a flashpoint for protests against Israel last spring. We interviewed Khalil then.
We want a divestment from the Israeli occupation.
In the wake of the nationwide protests, President Trump has vowed to crack down on anti-Semitism on college campuses. Today, he called Khalil's detainment the first arrest of many to come.
Any resident alien who commits a crime is eligible for deportation.
DHS would not comment on what, if any, charges Khalil is facing. The agency's website says he's currently detained in Louisiana.
People are being disappeared under our government's watch with no recourse, no charges, and it's a massive escalation that everybody should be concerned about.
According to the Associated Press, Khalil was under investigation by a new committee at Columbia that addresses cases of alleged discrimination. Khalil telling the AP the allegations against him are mostly social media posts that I had nothing to do with. Columbia University saying it's committed to following the law and to the freedom of speech. Khalil's lawyer is challenging his detainment.
Emily, thank you. And here's some other headlines that we're watching tonight. The Pope's condition is getting better today. The Vatican said he is responding well to his treatments. Remember, the Pope has been in the hospital battling double pneumonia for weeks now. And despite the good news, the Vatican says he will stay in the hospital for a little bit longer. And 5 people miraculously survived a small plane crash in Pennsylvania over the weekend. That is the aftermath right there. That fiery scene was caught on video Sunday in Lancaster County. You can see the wreckage in that parking lot with cars nearby being torched. But so far, we understand no one on the ground was hurt, and the door to the plane apparently opened mid-flight, leading to that emergency crash. And we can now add Maryland to the states with at least one confirmed case of the measles. Health officials there say the person has recently traveled out of the country and that some people at Dulles Airport and Johns Hopkins Hospital may have been exposed. Authorities also think that these don't have any connection to the outbreak we've seen in Texas and New Mexico. And the Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments on whether conversion therapy in Colorado is unconstitutional. That's counseling designed to keep young people from identifying as gay, bi, or trans. The outcome of this case will likely be a big deal for the country since more than 20 states right now have similar bans. And it's the show that helped make Donald Trump a household name. And now, more than 20 years after it aired on NBC, The Apprentice is now streaming on Amazon Prime. Now, this is the second big deal Amazon has made with the Trump family. Back in January, the company announced a documentary about First Lady Melania Trump. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. If you got X'd out while trying to scroll on X today, you are not alone. Elon Musk is now blaming a massive cyber attack for outages on that social media platform, and he is pointing the finger at someone in Ukraine. Plus, it is day 4 of the search for an American college student who vanished while on a spring break trip in the Dominican Republic. That's where the search stands later tonight, and that's coming up this hour, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. If you happen to be on X today, you might have noticed some serious lags. Well, just a little bit ago, Elon Musk blamed a cyber attack.
There was a massive cyber attack to try to bring down the X system with IP addresses originating in the Ukraine area.
Now, as with any of the details on hacks like this, it is hard for us on the outside to tell for sure. But right now, there's a hacking group known as Dark Storm that's been claiming responsibility on Telegram for the DDoS attack, which is basically when an attacker uses like this army of bots to flood servers with a bunch of fake internet traffic. Let's bring in Axios cybersecurity reporter Sam Sabin, who's been following this hack. Sam, good to see you. So denial of service attacks, you know, I hate to say this, but they're kind of basic, right? Like, is this one particularly sophisticated? What does this tell us about the attack and X's cyber defenses?
Yeah, so you're right. They are pretty basic. The whole intent is to cause what we've seen today, which is psychological panic for people to have distrust in a platform or distrust in whoever this threat actor is trying to get us to not trust, right? And so it could be sophisticated, and I use that in quotes, solely because of the scale. If Elon Musk is saying it's massive, he could just have evidence, potentially, possibly, that there were a lot of servers involved, or perhaps there needed to be a lot of manpower behind this, and that whatever the hacking team is behind this actually does have those resources. That's pretty much the extent of how sophisticated these DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks can get. The biggest takeaway maybe is that X, I mean, any company can really be a victim to DDoS. X is just very, very public facing. And because of their ownership, there are a lot of politically motivated groups that could be targeting them for various reasons. And so X could have the best security in the world, but any company can really be the victim of just a swarm of malicious bot activity targeting their websites. And if there's too much traffic on a website, it's going to crash. So they might need more capacity in the future, just given how political the site has become in recent years. But that's pretty much the extent of what we've learned so far about X and its security.
Yeah, and, you know, we've heard, like, there's this global espionage intrigue kind of factor in all of this. Musk is blaming IP addresses traced back to Ukraine, I think. Like, is that definitive here? His supporters will say it's obviously Ukraine, mad about what Trump's been doing. Others will say, like, no, this is Russia trying to, like, muddy the waters and double agent this whole thing. But, like, what do we really know right now?
Yeah, so none of that is super definitive. Unfortunately, we would have to be like on the servers at X to really know, or be a researcher who is at a third-party company that is known to track maybe the servers used by various Ukrainian groups. I will say there are a bunch of different actors that this could be, might be. The potential and the cause or the impact of DDoS is to cause us to have these questions, right, and really think, oh, are there bad actors? Oh, is this, you know, a reason why we shouldn't trust our government or various things? We could dream up conspiracy theories for days if we really wanted to. But what we do know is, one, the group that you mentioned earlier, Dark Storm Team, they are known to be supporters of Palestine. It is a hacktivist group that has been known to launch DDoS attacks kind of in this vein against entities that maybe have supported Israel during the conflict in the Middle East. And then in Ukraine during the ongoing war there, we have seen Russian hacktivists and we have seen Ukrainian hacktivists going after each other in various ways, all using DDoS. The idea is to create this idea that you know, hackers can turn off the lights at any point. They can turn off your websites. They can make it so you can't access these services. And so it really could be any of these actors. We just don't really know right now. It is legitimate that it could be Ukraine. It could be a pro-Palestinian group. It could be Russia. It could really be anyone. And until we have some sort of forensic analysis to really tell us, we might not know for sure.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to get that, but we're also seeing all this as we see Teslas, like Cybertrucks, stores, superchargers getting attacked in the actual world with vandalism or like lit on fire. Is there any connection with what you've seen posted on Telegram to some of what we've seen online? Like anything definitive, or is this all pretty spread out right now?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. I think it's super fair to assume there could be a connection. Hacktivists, if they are the ones who are behind this, they are the ones who are claiming it. So I guess that's what I'm going with in the moment, if I want to pull that thread. They are opportunistic, right? They are looking at the news. They are willing to, I don't know, target websites like this if it seems right, and then they can get their hacker glory. On Telegram, I haven't personally seen much. I could have, you know, missed it in the hoopla of the day that connects this X cyber attack to all of the stuff that's happening with Tesla. But I think, you know, there's probably a narrative that maybe potentially could play out in the next few days as to how this feeds into growing distrust or dismay among certain parties around what Elon Musk and Trump are doing in government spaces, right? And targeting his money, things like that. That's always a possibility, but we're just not seeing that
connection yet.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to more of your reporting. Axios cyber reporter Sam Sabin, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
And turning now over to Meta, a former Facebook employee has come out with a tell-all memoir about her time at the company, and the book is alleging claims of sexual harassment, human rights failures, and more. And NBC's Stephanie Gosk sat down with her for an exclusive one-on-one.
I want to talk about something important today.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg says he wants Facebook to be a home for free speech.
It's time to get back to our roots around free expression.
But in her book, Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism, former Facebook director Sarah Wynne Williams says the company was ready to abandon those principles roughly a decade ago to gain access to a critical market by appeasing the Chinese government.
They wanted a version of Facebook that could censor, that would give them control, sort of the anti-freedom of expression version of Facebook.
And to do that, did Facebook have to compromise some of its policy?
To me, it seemed like Facebook compromised almost every policy it had.
Relying on documents, emails, and her own experience, the former diplomat who helped Facebook navigate global relations with world leaders chronicles her 6 years working for the company and her own disillusionment when she says she realized all Facebook cared about was, in her words, growth at all costs.
More. They just bigger. More money, more people using the product, more.
Meta is trying to block the book's publication set for tomorrow. In a statement, the company writes, "We do not operate our services in China today. We ultimately opted not to go through with the ideas we'd explored," which Mark Zuckerberg announced in 2019. Back in 2015, Wynne Williams says Zuckerberg was desperate to break into China and actively strategized ways to make it happen. An internal document provided by Wynne Williams and reviewed by NBC News weighed the pros and cons of Facebook conducting surveillance for the Chinese government. One employee raising the concern that it could lead to death, torture, and incarceration of Facebook users in China.
There were people within Facebook that thought, oh, we might get some people killed because of this.
Right, but that's worth it. That's okay if you get into China.
In another document Wynne Williams cites in her book, Facebook staffers lay out how the company could react if their plans were leaked to the public, including drafting fake headlines they may need to respond to, like, "China now has access to all Facebook user data," or "Facebook grants backdoor access to Chinese user data." NBC News has reviewed that document as well. In the end, a deal to operate in China wasn't reached. In 2017, Wynne Williams was fired. She believes it was retaliation for a sexual harassment accusation she made. A Meta spokesperson said 8 years ago, Sarah Wynne Williams was fired for poor performance and toxic behavior, and an investigation at the time determined she made misleading and unfounded allegations of harassment. The mother of three says she wrote this book knowing the reaction could be fierce.
I think people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know what this big, powerful company is really like.
With Meta set to become even more influential in the age of artificial intelligence, that is why she says she is sounding the alarm. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Stephanie, thanks. And still ahead, the CEO of LA's Water and Power Department is asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars in security for herself in the aftermath of the deadly wildfires we saw here. What's happening there? Coming up after the break. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. 5 more people have died from the flu in Montana, and that's according to state health officials there. That brings the season total to about 32, though the total number of flu cases in the state is finally starting to go down. And the CEO of LA's Department of Water and Power says she has been getting more and more threats since the Palisades fire, and now she wants $700,000 from the board for private security. The proposal would see the CEO get at least one designated armed security guard and a driver. LA's DWP has been criticized for diminished water pressure in some hydrants during the height of the fire. And in Seattle, police are investigating a fire that damaged 4 Tesla Cybertrucks. No one was hurt, and Teslas have been the target of vandalism, with its CEO, Elon Musk, suggesting that the attacks are political. And coming up, U.S. and Ukrainian officials are coming face-to-face in Saudi Arabia this week for peace talks for the first time since that explosive Oval Office meeting. So will these talks be more productive than the last time? NBC's Keir Simmons will have the latest from Saudi Arabia. But first, you got to see this. This is a very, very exciting spotting in a Bay Area park. Those are some trail cameras at Hood Mountain Regional Park, and they recorded the first ever sighting of baby bear cubs since the park started tracking black bears more than 9 years ago. The two cubs were seen following after their mama on recently released video there, and park officials say this is a very promising sign that the park is healthy enough to support black bear cubs. And to the Middle East now, where U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators are meeting in Saudi Arabia, trying to get peace talks and that crucial minerals deal back on track. Remember that disastrous Oval Office meeting between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky just a little over a week ago? Well, now Saudi Arabia is trying to play the middleman of sorts, hosting a new round of talks that both sides are hoping play out much differently than the last time around. NBC's Keir Simmons is in Saudi Arabia for us.
Well, both President Zelensky and Secretary of State Marco Rubio here in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, meeting with the Crown Prince of the kingdom. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, acting a little as a mediator to try to honestly help President Zelensky repair some of the damage from that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office. The meetings here behind closed doors, will hear very much less about it, certainly see less, and frankly both sides will probably be relieved at that prospect. Then there's going to be, and separately, a meeting between the US delegation and the Ukrainian delegation. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, talking about that as really in many ways a fact-finding mission, trying to establish as he sees it, the position of Russia and the position of Ukraine, and just how far apart they are. They are a long way apart, and there are many reasons why both sides may not want a ceasefire at this time. Ukraine certainly wants to try and re-establish relations with the US, get its intelligence feed, if you like, back on track, as well as support from the United States. And I think you can expect President Zelensky to say thank you a lot, and also to try to make sure that his team is clear that they are interested in a ceasefire. But I think the Ukrainians won't give that much ground. They, I think, will still come trying to negotiate. If these talks here in Saudi Arabia do not go well, the Ukrainians will know that will likely lead to more pressure from President Trump. Keir Simmons, NBC News, Jeddah.
Keir, thank you. Let's take a quick look at some stories that are happening around the world right now. Today, a fuel tanker was hit by a cargo ship in the North Sea. That caused both boats to burst into flames. Now, this happened off the coast of Britain. The tanker was carrying jet fuel for the U.S. government, and now that fuel is starting to spill into the sea. Officials say all 37 members aboard both ships are safe and accounted for. And Israel has cut off electricity to Gaza. This comes not even a week after Israel stopped the entry of food, fuel, and other supplies into Gaza as well. And Israel says it's doing this to try to pressure Hamas into ceasefire talks, while Hamas says they should not be punished into making concessions. And in London, a man accused of climbing a cultural landmark was in court today. Now, video caught 29-year-old Daniel Day just hanging out near the top of Big Ben, barefoot and holding a Palestinian flag. Negotiators were able to talk him down after 16 hours, but Day has been charged with trespassing and recklessly causing a public nuisance. And a surprise strike shut down Germany's Hamburg airport yesterday. Thousands of security staff walked off the job with only about a half-hour notice over pay and working conditions there. The strike at Hamburg is said to be the first of many across Germany's airports this week, which could affect over 500,000 travelers. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything, and yet another Chinese company is stepping into the AI ring. We are talking all things Manus, a new AI agent going viral, but can it live up to China's DeepSeek or go way beyond that? We're going to get into that next. Hey, welcome back. Tonight in the future of everything, did China just pull another DeepSeek and slap us across the GPT face? Well, we've got the latest on this thing called Manus, but first, scientists are once again saying that room temperature superconductors might actually be possible, and until now, they've only worked in the extreme cold, so we can't really use them for everyday stuff. But there is a new study that just dropped in the Journal of Physics that says that can change if scientists just figure out the right form of condensed matter. And tonight, we are going to show you what looks like a very harmless, regular old tech hype video talking about the latest AI tool. And when you see it, it seems pretty run-of-the-mill unless you are paying close attention.
For the past year, we've been quietly building what we believe is the next evolution in AI. And today, we're launching an early preview of Manus, the first general AI agent. This isn't just another chatbot or workflow. It's a truly autonomous agent that bridges the gap between conception and execution. While other AI stops at generating ideas, Manus delivers results. We see it as the next paradigm of human-machine collaboration, and potentially a glimpse into AGI.
A glimpse into AGI. AGI, the holy grail of AI, for holy grail of computing, technology itself, possibly even like our entire understanding of consciousness. Artificial general intelligence. We talk about it a lot here, and no, this video did not come from Silicon Valley. Once again, it is a Chinese company claiming yet another seismic breakthrough in creating a general AI agent. This one, instead of like a ChatGPT worker, think like an AI CEO that can command entire teams of AI that don't hesitate like humans, but they work at lightning speed. So let's bring in Forbes contributor Craig Smith to talk a little bit more about Manus. Craig, like, this is a tough one. It always seems like AGI is a weird concept to explain because a lot of people, at first, they thought AI was this all-powerful, all-knowing thing when ChatGPT first came around. Then you try it, you saw some of the limitations, and you're like, okay, that can't even do this. And then you walk away. But what is Manus here doing that could totally change work as we know it?
Yeah, well, first of all, the difference between Manus and something like ChatGPT is it's not a model. It's a system. It's an assembly of models. And actually the core model, one of the core models is Anthropic's Claude 2.7. But it has a combination of models that are working together to break down problems and solve them independently. So you give it a goal, and then you can walk away, and it takes that goal and figures out how to reach that goal and does everything. It's got access to nearly 30 tools, software tools, and it can access websites. And the video you're showing, it can work on, I think in that video, up to 50 screens simultaneously. So what makes it interesting is that it's autonomous, that it operates in the cloud, not on your computer. So you can give it a goal and walk away, shut your computer down, and when it's reached the goal, it'll notify you, and it does all of that autonomously.
Yeah, pretty incredible, and even more incredible to think that this is the second time that China has had an insane AI moment this year. First DeepSeek, now Manus, and they're doing all of this without access to what we have, which is like the most technologically advanced chips in the universe. How are they able to do this?
Yeah, well, and first of all, with this system, it's following the trend. I mean, everyone's working on agents, on multi-agent systems. OpenAI has something called Operator. You give it a task, and it'll complete the task. What's different about this is it's much more powerful. It beat OpenAI in one of the main benchmarks, but it's not a step toward AGI in itself, and it's not as big a deal as DeepSeek was. DeepSeek was a big deal because of the chip embargo that the U.S. has on China. Everyone was surprised that the Chinese could create a model that bested OpenAI and Claude and all these other leading models in the United States without access to chips. But in fact, there is a surplus of stockpiled chips in China. They're just spread unevenly across the country. But that's forcing people in areas that don't have access to those chips to be more innovative. So DeepSeek was able to train its model on many fewer chips than OpenAI is using or Anthropic. And in this case, again, it's kind of the direction that we're going in the U.S., and they leaped ahead of us and did it. And these guys are in their early 30s. China has vastly more computer software engineers than the United States. And
incredible. Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of competition.
Yeah. Scarcity breeding ingenuity there. Incredible to see. Craig Smith, thanks so much for breaking this down for us tonight. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.